Hey everyone, welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We sincerely apologize for the long silence, but starting today, we're committed to bringing you powerful, emotional stories every single day. Thank you for staying with us. What would you do if the love of your life smiled at you every morning while hiding the worst betrayal behind your back? This is the story of how a perfect marriage unraveled, not with screaming or fighting, but with silence, secrets, and a single message that changed everything. If you're hooked already, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment below. Your support keeps this channel alive and helps others find these powerful stories too. It was one of those crisp autumn mornings when the light cuts through the cold like a blade. The kind of morning that makes the world feel sharper, more alive. I stood in the kitchen, leaning casually against the countertop with a warm mug of coffee in my hands, watching Melissa as she got ready for work. She looked beautiful in the soft golden light, her hair tied back, her coat slipping over her shoulders, her movements familiar, automatic, comforting. She turned, smiled at me, one of those quick, habitual smiles spouses give each other after years of knowing what the other will do before they even move. Then she stepped out the front door. That smile stayed with me for a moment. I remember thinking, God, I'm lucky. This is a good life. At least, I thought it was. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Nothing unusual, I'm used to getting early texts. But this one didn't feel like the others. It wasn't a notification from work or a message from a friend. It was from an unknown number. You deserve to know what Melissa's really up to. My grip tightened on the phone. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to open it or throw it across the room. A strange mix of dread and disbelief began curling in my stomach. My fingers hovered for a second before finally tapping the message. And just like that, my world changed. The photo appeared instantly. Melissa. Sitting at a bar. Leaning in close to a man I didn't recognize. His hand was on her thigh, not in a friendly way, not in a clumsy accident, but like it belonged there. That smile she had, it wasn't the one I knew. It wasn't mine. My hands began to tremble, and I could feel my breath catch in my throat. My heart wasn't just beating fast, it was panicking. It felt like I was watching someone else's life, someone else's nightmare. But it was mine. I wanted to believe it was a cruel prank, maybe even photoshopped. But deep down, I already knew. I had known something was wrong for weeks. The late evenings. The excuses. The way she suddenly treated her phone like it held state secrets. And me? I just kept pretending it was all in my head. That I was being paranoid. That I was the problem. But this photo? This was real. Undeniable. Still, one photo wasn't enough. I couldn't confront her with a single image. I needed to be smarter. I needed more. I called into work and told them I was sick. That whole day, I turned into someone else, someone obsessive, calculating. I scoured her social media, combed through old emails, checked her credit card statements. Things I never thought I'd do. I felt disgusting. But the more I found, the more the fire inside me grew. And then, I found it. A hotel bill from the Briarstone Inn. From last weekend. The weekend she said she was visiting her sister. The name on the receipt wasn't hers. It wasn't a woman's name at all. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just sat there at the kitchen table, gripping that piece of paper like it was the only thing holding me upright. All the puzzle pieces started to come together, and every second of the last few weeks twisted into place with horrific clarity. That evening, when she came home, I greeted her the same as always. Kissed her on the cheek. Asked about her day. She smiled. She told me the same story I'd heard 100 times. The same tone. The same rhythm. And it hit me just how good she was at this. Lying. Deceiving. I told her my day had been busy, but nothing unusual. I laughed at the right moments. She had no idea. And that's exactly what I wanted. The days that followed were a blur of deliberate movements. Every word, every glance, every moment I was pretending. Pretending to be the loving, oblivious husband while watching her every step like a hawk. My rage stayed hidden, locked tightly behind a mask of normalcy. She had no clue I knew. And I wasn't ready to tip my hand. Not yet. Melissa had developed patterns I never noticed before. She'd come home, head straight to the bedroom with her phone, stay there longer than necessary. If I walked in, she'd close the screen fast, smile that same practiced smile. The smile that used to melt me. Now, it made me sick. One evening, I decided to test her. I told her I'd have to work late. Made up a story about a tight deadline. She barely reacted. "Oh, okay, honey. Good luck." No suspicion. No hesitation. Almost relief. But I didn't go to work. I drove across town, parked near the house, and waited. I had already installed a small hidden camera inside the guest house window a few days earlier, an old phone set up to record motion-triggered video. Desperate? Maybe. But I didn't care. Not anymore. At 9:07 p.m., I got the text I expected. Go to bed early. Sweet dreams. Yeah, sure. 15 minutes later, I watched through the grainy camera feed as she stepped into the bedroom. Calm. Relaxed. Then, she changed into that same black dress she wore on our 10th anniversary. The one she knew I loved. The one she knew meant something. She looked in the mirror, smiled at herself, and walked out the front door without a second thought. And just like that, everything inside me broke. The doubt. The hope. It all vanished. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I waited a few more minutes to give her a comfortable lead, then slipped out the back door, climbed into my car, and started following her. My hands were tied on the wheel, my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Every nerve in my body was on fire, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time for emotion. This was the time for evidence. I kept my distance, headlights off, never letting her car get too far ahead. She drove casually, too casually, like someone who wasn't hiding anything. And maybe that's what infuriated me most. The ease. The comfort. As if I didn't even exist. She pulled into the parking lot of the Briarstone Inn, the same boutique hotel from the bill I had found earlier. I parked 2 streets away, under the shadow of a massive oak tree, and watched. She stepped out of the car like it was routine. Fixed her hair in the side mirror. Smoothed her dress. Then walked into the lobby like she belonged there. Seconds later, he appeared. The man from the photo. He strolled in from the opposite side of the building, relaxed, confident, too familiar with the place. Too familiar with her. She lit up when she saw him, her whole face softened, like she had finally arrived somewhere safe. They embraced. His hand went to the small of her back. She kissed his cheek. My stomach turned, and I nearly opened the door to storm inside right then. But I didn't. Instead, I lifted my phone and started filming. Every movement. Every touch. Every stolen smile. The way they looked at each other, it wasn't casual. It wasn't new. This had been going on for a while. And the longer I watched, the less I recognized the woman I had married. Melissa had never looked at me like that. Not once in the last year. Maybe not ever. They walked to the elevator, arms touching, fingers brushing. And just before the doors closed, she leaned into him and whispered something in his ear that made him laugh. That laugh stabbed me more than any physical wound could have. I lowered my phone slowly, feeling something collapse in my chest. They were gone. Upstairs. Out of sight. But the image was burned into me like acid. My wife. The woman I had planned a future with, grown old within my mind, she was upstairs in a hotel room with another man, laughing. I stayed in my car for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was less. Maybe more. I don't know. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't cry. I couldn't scream. I just sat there, jaw clenched, hands numb, staring at the hotel like it might catch fire from my anger alone. Eventually, I drove home. The streets were quiet. The sky dark. I barely noticed the world around me. My house, our house, looked exactly the same from the outside. Calm. Still. Like nothing had happened. But inside me, everything had shifted. I walked inside, made a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in silence. I watched the steam rise from the mug, watched it fade into the air. That's what it felt like everything was slipping away, evaporating, and I was powerless to stop it. When Melissa came home that night, she was glowing. Hair tousled like she'd just walked out of a magazine shoot. She kissed me on the cheek. Asked if I had eaten. I told her I had. I lied. She poured herself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch, and started scrolling through her phone like it was just another Thursday. And I let her. Because this time, I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to let her guard down. Because the moment I revealed what I knew, I didn't want her to have a single escape route. The next morning, everything was normal again. I made breakfast. She kissed me goodbye. And I smiled like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't planning the most precise, devastating confrontation of my life. Over the following days, I kept collecting evidence. I checked her tablet while she was in the shower. Found more messages, more plans. I downloaded everything onto a flash drive. I backed up the recordings. I made copies. There was no room for doubt now. She had betrayed me fully, repeatedly, without a flicker of remorse. And still I said nothing. Until Saturday. She woke up in an unusually good mood. Wore one of my old sweatshirts, hummed as she made coffee. You'd think she had just fallen in love, not torn a marriage to shreds. Hey babe, she said cheerfully. Let's just have a lazy day today. No stress. Just the two of us. I nodded. Sounds perfect, I replied, forcing a smile. Let me just take care of something upstairs real quick. I went to the bedroom, picked up my phone, and opened the video one last time. I needed to see it. Needed to remind myself this wasn't a bad dream. Every second of it sharpened the rage in my chest, steadied my nerves. Then I walked back down, sat next to her on the couch, and stared at the TV like everything was fine. She reached for the remote, flicking through channels absent-mindedly. Hey, I said, keeping my tone light. I need to talk to you about something. She looked at me, distracted but smiling. Sure, what's up? I pulled out my phone, still calm, still collected, and said, You've been working a lot lately, right? Yeah, she replied, stretching. But it's calming down finally. Good, I said, nodding. Because I think we should celebrate. She laughed lightly. Celebrate what? I turned the phone toward her. Pressed play. Maybe this. Her eyes locked on the screen. And then everything changed. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, and for the first few seconds, I don't even think she was breathing. The blood drained from her face, her lips parted just slightly, and I could see the moment it hit her. This wasn't just suspicion. This wasn't a guess. It was proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Her hand twitched, as if she wanted to grab the phone and shut it off, but she didn't move. She just sat there, trapped, as her own betrayal played out in front of her in silent, cruel clarity. I can explain, she whispered, but the words were hollow. Her voice was thin, unsure, nothing like the confident tone she always used to carry. She sounded like a stranger. I leaned back against the couch, my body calm, but my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Explain? I asked quietly, almost amused. Please, Melissa. I'm listening. But she had nothing. Not really. Her mouth opened and closed again. 1,000 thoughts probably ran through her mind, excuses, justifications, maybe even lies she hadn't had time to rehearse. But nothing came out. Her face crumpled slightly, and I saw something that almost resembled regret. Almost. She didn't cry. That surprised me. She didn't beg, didn't throw herself at my feet or try to gaslight me. She just froze. And then, finally, said the one thing that shattered any remnants of the life we built. If you want me to go, I'll go. I nodded slowly. Start packing. She stood up without another word and walked to the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, not moving, just staring at the space where she had been. The warmth on the cushion where she sat. Her scent still lingering in the air. It was a surreal moment, the kind that doesn't feel real until much later. I wasn't even angry in that instant. I was empty. Hollow. Like someone had cut out a piece of me and I hadn't quite figured out what was missing yet. I heard drawers opening, zippers being pulled, closet doors creaking. Then silence again. After maybe 20 minutes, she returned with 2 bags in her hands. She placed them by the front door and stood there, unsure if she should say anything more. I didn't speak. Neither did she. She looked at me one last time. There was something in her eyes, sorrow, maybe. Or shame. Maybe just exhaustion. This wasn't what I wanted, she said quietly. But I didn't answer. What was there left to say? She waited another second. Hoping, I think, for something. A crack in my voice. A sign of forgiveness. A last grasp at whatever might have still been between us. But I gave her nothing. And finally, she opened the door and walked out into the night. She didn't look back. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. And suddenly, the silence was deafening. I sat on the couch for a long time after that. My hands resting on my knees, eyes locked on the empty hallway. I thought I would feel victorious. I thought I would feel strong. But all I felt was a strange kind of grief. Like mourning someone who hadn't died, but was gone just the same. That version of her, the Melissa I thought I knew, the life I thought we had, it all died that night. And I had to be the one to bury it. The next morning, I started collecting the rest of her things. Her shoes by the door. Her makeup on the bathroom counter. Books she had never finished, half-empty bottles of perfume, little notes she'd written me over the years. All of it into boxes. I didn't rush. I didn't rage. I just moved through the house like a ghost, methodically erasing her from every corner. Each item stung. Each memory burned. But it had to be done. By the end of the day, everything of hers was sealed and stacked by the door. I didn't even text her. I knew she'd come for them eventually. And when she did, I didn't want to be there. The house felt bigger now. Emptier. Like the air itself had changed. I walked from room to room that night, not really knowing what I was looking for. Maybe some trace of myself. Some version of who I used to be before all this happened. But all I found was silence. And I started to wonder if that silence would ever leave. The following week was a strange, numb blur. Everything in the house was quieter, even though the TV was on and the radio played in the background. The silence wasn't just a lack of sound, it was the absence of her. The absence of routine. Of shared laughter. Of casual complaints. Even the air felt different, like it didn't know who it belonged to anymore. I found myself waking up at the usual time, expecting her beside me, reaching instinctively to her side of the bed only to find a cold void. I wasn't crying. Not really. But grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes, it's just the unbearable weight of a coffee mug held too long in your hand, or the way your heart stumbles when a notification pops up and, for half a second, you hope it's her even when you know you don't want it to be. I focused on practical things at first. Paperwork. Bank accounts. Legal steps. My lawyer, an old friend of the family, kept things clean and simple. Melissa didn't fight me. She didn't ask for more time. She didn't come begging. In fact, our communication narrowed down to a handful of polite, sterile texts about logistics. When she picked up her remaining boxes, I made sure I wasn't home. I didn't want to see her, and she didn't ask to see me. She let herself in, grabbed her things, and left without leaving a trace. No note. No final word. Just absence. I tried to stay busy. Reorganized the garage. Took long walks after sunset. Cooked meals I didn't finish. Drank more than I should have, just to dull the evenings. I rewatched old movies we used to love, wondering if I could reclaim them or if they'd always taste like her now. Some nights I slept on the couch without realizing it, just drifting off in the same clothes I'd been wearing since morning. Some mornings I'd stand in the bathroom staring at my own reflection, wondering if I looked different now. Older. More broken. Less trusting. And yet, beneath all of that, there was something else. Something quieter, but growing. A strange kind of relief. Not joy. Not healing. Not yet. But a release. As if the burden I didn't know I'd been carrying for months had finally slipped off my shoulders. The lies. The doubt. The second-guessing. It was all over. I was finally in a space where I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to wonder where she was. I didn't have to lie to myself to hold on to someone who had already let go long before I knew it. One Saturday morning, maybe 3 weeks after she left, I opened the windows for the first time. Let the air in. The house smelled different, less like her perfume, more like wood and dust and something that felt like honesty. I took every picture of us, every frame, every memory on the walls and carefully boxed them up. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Just necessity. It was time to make room. For air. For light. For something else. Maybe even for someone else, someday. But mostly for myself. That same afternoon, I got a message from her. The first personal one since it all ended. Hey. Just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I hope one day you'll be okay. I stared at the words for a long time. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't owe her comfort anymore. And honestly, I wasn't ready to say anything that wasn't soaked in pain. Maybe someday, but not yet. I deleted the message and put my phone down. Then I stepped outside, barefoot on the back porch, a coffee in my hand and the sky wide open above me. For the first time in a long time, I realized I was free. Damaged. Yes. Hurt. Deeply. But free. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of a fog. Slowly, I began to reclaim the edges of myself, piece by piece. I started waking up without that crushing weight in my chest. The silence in the house no longer felt like punishment, it began to feel like clarity. I found myself moving differently. I began answering old messages, calling friends I hadn't spoken to in months. People had sensed something was wrong before, but I'd kept them at arm's length, too ashamed to admit that my marriage was falling apart while I pretended it was perfectly intact. Now that the secret had broken open, I didn't have to fake anything anymore. I didn't talk about it much, not at first. But just being around people again, laughing, listening, being seen, helped more than I expected. One afternoon, I found an old sketch pad in the back of my closet. I used to draw all the time in college, landscapes, portraits, sometimes just rough outlines of things I saw on walks. I hadn't touched a pencil in years. But something inside me reached for it again, and that night, I sat on the floor of the living room with a glass of whiskey and started sketching the oak tree behind the house. The lines weren't perfect, but it didn't matter. The point wasn't beauty. The point was motion. My hand moving. My heart opening, just a little. I started drawing again every night after that. It became my therapy. My release. About a month later, I signed up for a painting workshop held at a local gallery. I didn't tell anyone. I just showed up. There were maybe 15 people in the room, all different ages, backgrounds, stories. I sat near the back and tried to blend in. And then she sat next to me. Clara. She had a warmth to her, the kind of presence that made the room feel easier just because she was in it. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had a paintbrush tucked behind one ear like she didn't even realize it was there. We didn't speak much that first session, but I noticed the way she hummed softly when she worked. The way she tilted her head when she was focused. The way she didn't try too hard to impress anyone. Over the next few weeks, we kept showing up to the same class. Eventually, our conversation stretched from minutes to hours. She asked about my work. I asked about her travels. I told her I'd been through a hard time, without giving specifics. She didn't push. She just listened. There was no pressure with Clara. No forced smiles. No unspoken expectations. She didn't try to fix me, and maybe that's why I kept coming back. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I had to pretend I was okay. One evening, after class, we ended up walking together to the parking lot. It was raining softly, the kind that barely touches your skin but leaves the air thick with memory. She stopped before getting into her car, looked at me with those calm, steady eyes, and said, "You have this stillness about you. Like someone who's been through fire and decided not to let it burn everything down." I didn't know what to say. But something in me broke open just a little more. I smiled. Not the polite kind. The real kind. And it felt foreign, like my face hadn't made that shape in years. We started meeting outside of class. Coffee, walks, small things. Nothing romantic, not really. Just presence. Connection. A reminder that not all intimacy is built on lies. That trust can grow quietly. That it doesn't have to scream to be real. Clara wasn't a replacement for Melissa. She wasn't a fix. She was something new. A different story. One I hadn't planned for, but maybe one I needed. And through all of this, I kept learning how to be alone. How to sit in silence without falling apart. How to make peace with the parts of myself I used to avoid. The man I used to be, the version of me who ignored red flags, who doubted his instincts, who made himself smaller to keep the peace, he was gone. In his place, someone quieter, stronger, more awake was starting to take shape. Sometime later, maybe 2 months, maybe more, I found myself sitting on a park bench beside Clara, the same park we'd walked through countless times, but this time something felt different. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel paths, and the air was heavy with that late summer stillness. We weren't speaking, just listening to the rustling leaves, to the world breathing. Clara reached into her bag, pulled out a small notebook, and flipped to a page where she'd been doodling faces, strangers, maybe, or pieces of people she'd known. She handed me the pencil without saying a word, and I took it. I didn't draw. I just held it. There was something in the weight of that moment that settled over me like a soft truth. I wasn't broken anymore. Bent, sure. Scarred, absolutely. But broken? No. I had survived something. And not just survived, it had shaped me, reshaped me. Melissa became a memory I didn't hate, but didn't hold on to either. She was part of my past, but not part of me anymore. I stopped checking for her online. Stopped rereading old texts. Her name slowly lost its echo. It didn't sting when I saw places we'd been. I could walk past restaurants and bookstores and not feel my chest cave in. Time didn't heal everything, but it gave me room to breathe, to rebuild, to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for not walking away earlier. And maybe that's the hardest part of healing, admitting your own silence was part of the pain. One afternoon, I ran into her. Melissa. It was unexpected, just one of those coincidences life throws at you when it thinks you're finally stable. She looked different. Older, somehow. Tired, though still beautiful. We exchanged polite nods. No words. Just the barest flicker of recognition. And then she kept walking. No drama. No closure speech. Just two people with too much history and nothing left to say. I stood there for a moment, waiting to feel something sharp, but it didn't come. All I felt was a quiet thankfulness. That she was gone. That I was still standing. Back in the present, Clara and I started seeing each other more often. But it wasn't rushed. It wasn't built on need or escape. It was calm. Rooted. We spent weekends visiting small towns, cooking simple meals, showing each other our unfinished work, her paintings, my messy sketches. There were no expectations. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt what it was like to be in someone's company without shrinking to fit their love. One evening, as we walked past a quiet lake surrounded by pine trees, Clara turned to me and said, "Do you ever think that maybe the worst thing that happens to us is what finally lets us see who we really are?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked out across the water, watching the ripples catch the last light of day. And in that silence, I realized she was right. The betrayal, the pain, the long unraveling of my marriage, it hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed me. It stripped away everything false, and what was left, though bruised, was real. So here I am now. Still healing, always healing, but alive. Present. And if you're listening to this, if you've been through your own kind of storm, just know what feels like an ending is often just the first page of something else. Something better. Something honest. You don't have to rush. Just breathe. You'll get there.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.